Welcome to the first of our Chamsys trainings. We're really looking to provide some information, not just going down the manual, but answering the kind of questions that lighting designers are going to be naturally asking, such as, what is Chamsys? How do I start a show? How do I get a fixture in here? How do I control those fixtures? Asking those questions and answering them in that way. Now, Chamsys is an interesting breed of console. It has picked up a lot of impetus, particularly in England and other parts of Europe, but now is making it a little more mainstream in the United States. Now, some people who come across Kansas or really want to use it are using it because it's what they've chosen. They've compared various different types of consoles. They've looked at the features, the price point values, obviously, big, I guess, factor in how we make our decisions. And we have specced out Chamsys. We just want to know how to use this thing that we just decided on. Others, like myself, perhaps you've been gifted Chamsys. You've been hired on in a venue, and Chamsys is what they use. And, well, I guess you got to figure it out. There's probably a lot of us in that category. So, if you're like me, this should be helpful for you as well. Now, the real question in the market of all the various types of consoles is, why does Chamsys exist? How is it different? Why did they make a console when there were already several out there? Now, it started in, I believe it was 2003, so the market was different than what we might expect it to be. So back then, 15 or so years ago, the market still had some of the same themes that we understand today, like ETC owns theater. Grand May was definitely a big player. Hog was a bigger player at that time. But you had some kind of disaffected Hog programmers that they wanted to make something that matched their way of thinking. Really design a console that presents itself in a way that LDs generally tend to think. And they kind of wanted to bridge the two worlds. It was hard for consoles like Hog that were designed for the concert world to enter the theater world. There's just kind of a different design, different workflow, but it was also difficult for theater consoles to do well with busking at concerts and those sort of things. So the idea was to create something like a hybrid that could live in both worlds, which is to say, kind of a chameleon where it could blend in wherever you put it. And that's the basis of the name, Chameleon Systems, which is why it's Chamsys, not Chamsys, although even I sometimes will say Chamsys because it's just what it looks like. So that's the why of Chamsys. Now, the basic what of Chamsys, there's a diagram, I'll put it up here, that you find in the manual that looks at the basic architecture of the system. Now, we want to think left to right, but we're going to look at a bit right to left here to kind of how do we get to what we want our lights to do. And that's what's coming out of the output engine. So how do we get the data that we want out of that output engine? That is sourced through two primary sources, the programmer and the playbacks. And as we look further left, we'll see that those have some interrelations. The programmer is the higher priority between the two, and you access that data through the programming windows, basically the interface that presents itself to you when you open up Chamsys. But through the programmer, you can store back into the show data, which involves also the default data like the locate values, the zero, home, pan, tilt positions, those sort of things that exist in the show data. And you add your programmer data to that, accessing it through the playbacks and getting it back out of the output engine. So you can live in the programming windows to get stuff into the programmer, or you can just live in the playbacks world and again get stuff out through the output position. So the way I tend to think about it is a series of layers. When we take our default data, again, this is stuff that is stored in the profiles of the fixtures. Like when you patch something, by default, it's off. That's a default data of 0 for the dimmer value. And it might be 00 or 128, 128 in a 8-bit kind of code there for pan and tilt values, or the various other things, shutter open rather than closed. But those are the default datas that are recorded with profiles. And then you have your programmer data. Some of it you're entering in raw. You're saying red 98, blue 26 or whatever. Or you may store and recall those as palettes. Those live in the data, the programmer data, I should say. But you can also store those in queues, which are combined together in queue stacks. And that you can access those either through the stack store, that's the place where you store the queue stacks, or there's the queue store for just storing the queues. But you can place them on the playbacks, the physical faders and buttons that you have on your console, or what look like physical faders and buttons if you're using the on PC version, which we're using for our lessons here. And then those playbacks are also further arranged in pages. So pages of playbacks. You just kind of punch through those and you access all that data. I would even say that there's another level that exists kind of beside the pages of playbacks, namely the execute page, which is a very powerful function that you'll probably want to get into earlier rather than later, because from there you can also access your playbacks, but more so you're directly accessing your queue stacks, your queues, and your palettes. So there's also some special items like clocks and timers and fade times and whatnot. But through that, you can set up a lot of information on all of those levels that you can access very quickly. But the base of the system follow these layers that we've outlined here. So that's just kind of an intro to what Chamsys is, the infrastructure behind how it works. We're going to start answering some of those questions about how we're going to start a show from scratch, how we're going to put fixtures in there, how we're going to control them. So I hope you enjoy. Hopefully Chamsys doesn't take offense at my use of their logo, but here it is, and hopefully we enjoy. Thank you.